Welcome to this explainer. We usually think of ethics as this dusty academic realm of philosophy, just a boring list of rules we're supposed to follow. But we're taking it out of the classroom today and dropping it right into your everyday life. Because ethics is so much more dynamic than that. It's literally the invisible architecture shaping the decisions you made this morning, the structure of our societies, and our very lives.
Let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental question. Think about it. Do we come into this world pre-programmed with a sense of right and wrong? Is there some biological moral compass just ticking away inside your brain from day one?
Well, the answer is a resounding no. Ethics absolutely cannot be shaped or even sustained in a vacuum. We aren't born with a fully formed ethical system. The research actually shows us that we desperately need society. We need an external environment, our culture, interacting with our genetics to even begin to understand what is ethical. A person could be born in absolute isolation, but to truly grasp ethics, they have to live among others.
To really unpack this, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start by decoding the essence of ethics, then look at the absolute requirement of free will, explore the it depends factor of context, map out our societal pillars, and finally, reveal the hidden forces actively shaping your morals right now.
All right, Section 1, Decoding the Essence. What are ethics really made of?
At its very core, the essence of ethics is about how we define what's good or bad. But it goes way deeper than just a rule book. It actually stems from a society's prevailing sense of justice. Imagine a child seeing another kid get slapped. Even without knowing the law, that observing child might instinctively feel it's unethical, right? Because fundamentally they believe in social justice and equal dignity. What's so fascinating is that these ethical standards often transcend mere law. Like, if a police officer refuses to help a victim simply because the incident happened an inch outside their strict jurisdiction, they might not be breaking the law, but we universally recognize that as running counter to ethics. It's maintained by an internal sense of responsibility, not just external accountability.
Now, there's a really sharp contrast between two specific approaches to this. Descriptive ethics just examines how communities actually behave in the real world right now. But prescriptive ethics, that preaches how we should behave. And the friction happens when prescriptive rules are handed down without any explanation whatsoever. When the why is missing, people just lose respect for the behavior. Take traditional family values. We're seeing a decline in these values among the youth specifically because the core reasons behind them just aren't being explained anymore.
Which brings us to Section 2, the free will requirement, and the illusion of choice.
Because for any of this evaluation of good and bad to actually matter, we must have agency. Ethics exclusively scrutinizes voluntary human action. It's a chain reaction. It only deals with actions when a person acts on their own free will, totally without coercion. You literally cannot jump straight to Step 3, ethical evaluation, without Steps 1 and 2 actively happening first.
So, the crucial point is that context completely shifts accountability. If you're forced to do something at gunpoint, you can't be called ethical or unethical. Why? Because the choice wasn't yours. You didn't act on your own. Without the genuine freedom to choose, the entire framework of ethical judgment just totally collapses.
But once we establish that we do have free will, we encounter a pretty messy reality. Section 3, the contextual nature of ethics. The it depends factor.
Because ethics are absolutely not a universal monolith. And this idea perfectly illustrates that it depends factor. The exact same action is judged entirely differently based on time, place, and the system. Spitting on the road might make you a total social pariah in Europe, but historically it may not carry that exact same ethical weight in India. Or take economics. Chasing massive profits is fundamentally unethical in a communist society, but in a capitalist society, you'd probably get an award for it. The rules of the game literally change depending on where you're standing.
And this brings us to a difficult truth. Ethics are inherently subjective. They're deeply warped by our own intense emotions and personal perceptions. When someone is angry, they might act in a highly unethical way driven purely by that emotion. This clash of subjective personal beliefs is exactly why we see such volatile societal conflicts. Impartially speaking, tragic events like riots, honor killings, or cases of cow vigilantism occur fundamentally because of deep, explosive conflicts regarding what different groups truly believe is ethical.
So if individuals are so subjective, how does a society function at all? Let's zoom out to Section 4, Societal and Cultural Pillars, to see how we build the framework.
Broad traditions and culture shape us at a foundational level, and those values vary wildly depending on where you were raised. For example, Western cultures tend to lean heavily into individualistic values, prioritizing personal freedom and autonomy. In contrast, historically, Indian cultures have prioritized altruism, placing a much higher ethical value on community and self-sacrifice for the group.
Within those cultures, religion and law basically act as the rule books. Religious texts deal directly with questions about how individuals should behave. In Jainism, eating a non-vegetarian diet is considered unethical, whereas in Islam, there is no such restriction. On the secular side, the law and modern constitutions formalize the shared ethical standards that most citizens of a nation subscribe to, literally writing our ethics into binding legal frameworks.
But those frameworks aren't frozen in stone. Finally, we reach Section 5, Hidden Forces Shaping Morals, the Invisible Hands.
These are the dynamic forces that constantly warp, shift, and reshape these pillars over time. Our moral codes are constantly evolving under various pressures. Time itself is a massive factor. I mean, what was acceptable in the 18th century is vastly different from now. Leadership plays a massive role too. Democratic, tolerant leadership builds tolerant societal traditions. Personal experience can rewrite ethics overnight, much like Emperor Ashoka's profound ethical transformation after witnessing the horrors of the Kalinga War. We're also swayed by inspiration from figures like Gandhi. And interestingly, while education definitely shapes our knowledge, the data suggests there's actually no direct relation between education levels and ethical behavior.
Sometimes, the biggest influencer is purely physical. A fascinating example from the sources is how sheer survival and geography can dictate morality. Brahmins in West Bengal traditionally eat a non-vegetarian fish diet. Why? Because the geography of the region simply dictated that they eat fish to survive, ultimately overriding standard religious dietary ethics.
And well, we can't talk about ethics without talking about power. Looking objectively at the data, what's considered right or wrong is generally dictated by the prevailing powers of the time. This broadly splits into three categories: social power, representing cultural or religious authority; economic power, like the incredible influence of massive corporate conglomerates like Tata; and political power, representing governmental leadership such as Modi. These forces largely dictate the ethical baseline the rest of us live under. This influence trickles all the way down to where you clock in every morning. Even the specific organization you work for will impose a unique value system that shifts your professional ethics. The ethical culture at a space agency like ISRO might differ significantly from a defense research agency like DRDO, and simply being in that environment shapes the ethical framework of the people working there. Ethics operate at individual, organizational, and international levels, and they are all constantly affecting each other. But here is the absolute most empowering takeaway from this entire explainer. Yes, we established early on that society shapes us, but man is not only shaped by ethics, man also shapes ethics. Remember that society is just made up of individuals. Because a few great personalities pushed back, historically terrible norms like slavery and over-discrimination, which were once fully accepted as ethical social norms, were overturned.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating reality. Ethics aren't a static law of the universe. They're a continuous, evolving conversation. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Considering how deeply subjective our morals are and how much they rely on the time, geography, and power structures of the present day, which of our unquestioned, rock-solid ethical rules today will the future realize were wrong all along? Keep questioning the invisible rules. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.